When the class officers and I were deciding upon the graduating speaker in the fall of last year, we chose from numerous equally qualified speakers who were all capable of ensuring a memorable graduation. However, for us the choice seemed clear. The keynote speaker tonight is someone who many seniors have come to know and love at some point in their 4 years at Stafford. He is highly regarded within the student body, not merely as a teacher, but also as a friend. In January, we studied a poetry unit of various Shakespearean sonnets, including Sonnet 73. In this sonnet, Shakespeare uses the image of a glowing fire as a metaphor for life. When the fire begins to fade, the ashes are left behind as a reminder of a life full of accomplishments. In explaining this sonnet to some confused seniors, he claimed that his ashes were the numerous students he has watched grow and mature to achieve great heights after high school. I present to you the first faculty member ever to be chosen to speak at graduation, Mr. James Andrews.
Hi. I think we have to get this right here. Nice to see you, though. It's really a little scary up here. I'd rather be up in my classroom. I'm not sure we can fit all of us in my classroom, so I guess we'll have to stay here for a while. And I used to be a kid who had nightmares for weeks before I had to give an oral report, so I think I've gotten over that a little bit. Now, I entitled this, How to Write a Speech, so I'm going to kind of tell you some of the parts as I'm going along, so I'll be a little relaxed at the transitions. And my students said they want to grade this, so we'll see what they give me tonight. The first part of the speech is supposed to be greetings to everyone, starting with the people on the stage. So I'd like to say hi to all the important people on the stage, in the audience, the prospective graduates, and the comfortable people in the nice, cool, quiet auditorium where we all might wish we could be if the temperature gets over 80 and the speeches get too long. I guess that's me. I also want to thank the kids who greatly honored me by asking me to give this speech, even though it took me a few minutes to get my breath after they did, and I'm not sure I've gotten it back yet. I hope I can get through this without making a complete fool of myself, or without saying too many politically incorrect things, or putting too many people to sleep. After all, with 3,000 people in the audience, I have a lot of chances to make somebody mad. If you'd like to debate the issues, go to my severely under construction website, jimteach.com, and email me, and we can have a nice argument if you want. Therefore, I'd like to have a disclaimer right here. And anything that I say is not Mr. Pugh's fault. However, I do believe that he volunteered to put on his cowboy hat and sunglasses and sing Born to be Wild if I get scared to run off the stage. Okay, now the first part of the speech is the positive part, all right, so I'm going to say nice things here. Firstly, we're living at the most exciting time in history for people like Andrews, who absolutely love gadgets. Anybody who's looked in my room knows my room is full of gadgets and pieces of old computers and things. It's been an awesome thing to see all the wonderful inventions which have made our lives so much easier and much more fun. With our computers, we can instantly access almost any information we want over the internet. And then we have our cell phones, because we heard one just a little while ago. Our ATMs, where we can get all the money we want right away, some of it on credit. And thousands of neat gadgets being invented by the cartload, so we can do things much faster and much easier, which is supposed to give us a lot of time to smell the roses. But what it does instead is to help us find a lot more things to do faster and easier till we become even busier than we were before. However, in the midst of all this plenty, we also need to remember where our wonderful country came from, so that when you become leaders, you can have good examples to follow. Even though we've recently been inundated with groups of professional whiners who want to sue everybody, smash things, stifle thought and talk with that ultimate intolerance, political correctness. See, I don't like that. We might whine less if we could realize where we are and what we have. We're the greatest place to live in the history of the world. There's no place on earth that's like us. Our United States, where so many different people have learned to mostly get along. And we have fights every once in a while, but mostly we get along. And where there's so many opportunities to succeed. Back in the 1770s, in the middle of a big mess of European stupid customs and stupid wars, which have continued to the present, I might add, a bunch of folks in an ocean away from Europe decided to break away from the lords and ladies and start a new country. Right around here, Thomas Jefferson, George Washington, and James Madison, with the help of some Yankees like Ben Franklin and John Adams, designed a country which they hoped could avoid the wars that had been going on for centuries in the old countries. We have a lot of fun studying those wars, but really they're mostly dumb. So what did they design? What did these people design? They designed us. And what principle did they use? Don't trust anybody with absolute power. Because, as the British historian Lord Acton aptly observed, absolute power corrupts absolutely. Remember that. Don't even trust English teachers with too much power. They designed a system to keep future leaders from getting too strong. A legislature, the president, court system, with all of them going after each other in the healthiest way, with free debate, while sometimes managing to get some good things accomplished. I like the gridlock thing. Notice that we had the most prosperous time in the history of the United States the last 8 years because we had gridlock. They couldn't decide how to spend our money. With the most important piece of the equation being a bunch of us ordinary people who can vote out the rascals whenever we want. They start letting power go into their heads. It would be nice in some countries if they could do that as well. We have a country where almost anybody with ability, with training, with guts, not too many bad habits, and who sometimes use deodorant, can get a job and move far beyond where most of the billions of people in the world could even dream of going. The deodorant is important. I hope you'll excuse me. Now, the next section is the depressing part, so I'm going to go on for like a page and 3/4 on depressing examples. So, here we go. I hope you'll excuse me for being a little depressing on your graduation night, but this section could be called Stupid Leaders. Because you are in a world, even though we're sitting here in the United States and we're nice and comfortable and we can do almost anything we want, go wherever we want, buy what we want, at least with credit cards. Many places in the world are not that nice. So Andrews, why bring it up? Because you're going to be the leaders. You're the people that are going to go out there and take care of this stuff after all of us baby boomers have retired. Of course, you'll be paying for us too, so thank you. Anyway. Most of the big problems of the world are not caused by the ordinary people who would often be satisfied to be left alone, but by the stupid leaders who have learned to stir up their people to get more money and maintain power. This is worth mentioning mainly because we older folks are going to leave these rotten apples for you younger leaders to deal with, hopefully with more smarts than we have sometimes used. As George Santayana said, those who do not remember the past are condemned to repeat it. Or in this case, not just the past, but the present as well. And, give you some King Lear. As the crazy King Lear said to the crying, blinded Gloucester, when we are born, we cry, and we are come to this great stage of fools. And that's why babies cry, in case you didn't know. In the Middle East, people are fighting and killing each other, as they have been doing for nearly 4,000 years. Since Abraham of Ur had 2 sons, Isaac and Ishmael, whose kids are still fighting 4,000 years later. In the Balkans, where my Marine son is stationed, they're still trying to kill each other off. We sent over troops to help the victims in Kosovo, giving them almost the whole country. But almost immediately, the stupid leaders we saved from destruction picked up their guns, went over the border into Macedonia, where my son is, by the way, where they're trying to mess up yet another country. Kind of dumb. In Rwanda, the stupid Hutu tribal leaders murdered 800,000 Tutsis, were defeated by the remaining Tutsis, and now the whole area of the continent is teeming with bloodthirsty soldiers, including lots of little kids running around with guns, shooting and killing people. And they said last week that the neighboring country of Burundi, they're getting ready to do the same thing again. In China, the stupid leaders arrest, imprison, and kill almost anybody who disagrees with them, such as the harmless Falun Gong members whose dangerous philosophy is mainly to do their morning exercises in the town square. In Afghanistan, the stupid Taliban leaders have pretty much made it illegal for women to do anything, except hide behind their veils and obey the men. started making people of other religions wear distinctive clothing, like Adolf Hitler used to do. And the folks who practice the main American religion are fair game for persecution almost anywhere in the world, as people practicing or changing religions of any sort, as we do all the time here, are likely to be ostracized, imprisoned, killed, or in Sudan, sold as slaves. It's probably a little long, but I have one more. Recently, the other night, I emailed Michelle Kang. If you were here a few years ago, she spoke at graduation. She's over in Oxford getting her second master's degree. And as I was writing to her, I realized that she was Korean American. If she had been in North Korea for the last 5 years or so, instead of getting a master's, she'd be getting instructions over the radio as to how to prepare grass to keep them starving. Just because the stupid North Korean leaders want war. They want guns. They want armies. Everything they want but food. Between 2 and 3 million people have starved to death in North Korea since 1995. And as I'm giving this speech, more than 400 people around the world are starved to death right now, mostly because of their stupid leaders. And so even though we have a wonderful country, even though you're wonderful people, we're sending you out there into the world, and you've got to try to take care of this stuff. Mainly because some of those crazy leaders are trying their best to get nukes. And you, my beloved students, as leaders of the future, must decide what types of leaders you will follow. But here at Stafford High, as I stand in the halls and watch the wonderfully interesting faces go by, I love you to stand in the hall and watch the faces. Sounds dumb, but I do. I see people from all over the world, of all colors, from all backgrounds, becoming friends. People who would have been taught to hate and kill each other on the other side of the world. Women who would have no rights on the other side of the world are walking and talking openly and dressing the way they want and don't have to worry about the mutilation and exploitation and poverty they would experience in countries with stupid leaders. Scott can only pronounce that. Stupid leaders, so I have to be obedient. That's why we have such a great country. And even in our country, and I have one more kind of negative thing here, so in our country we have stupid leaders too, and many of the teenagers won't all agree with this, but it irritates me, so I'm going to tell you. Thank you. And even in our country we have stupid leaders, mainly in the media, some of whom would sell out the children of America in a minute so they can make more money. When people ask me what has changed in the 35 years since I've been teaching, I'd have to say, not much. I've always had kids who have tried to do a good job with a little nudge from their teachers, and sometimes I even have to rewrite part of their papers. And a few students that we have to push a little bit harder. However, as you parents, who were once slightly wild teenagers, and remember I've been teaching 35 years, I know stories. So, be nice to them. Most kids grow up to be responsible adults and loving parents. I can still remember a student, I don't think he's here tonight, who hated me, who wanted to kill me, who wanted to go into the parking lot and fight me and everything else. So he graduated, we didn't kill each other or anything. And 20 years later, I'm driving up the highway toward Stafford, and right in front of Drew, I look over at the car that's going by me on the right, and I look over and I see this same person who hated my guts 20 years before. And I looked at him, and he looked at me, and I looked at him, and he looked at me, and we pointed, and we pulled over, and we hugged, and hey, this was really great, because he'd grown up. He'd gone out into the world, he'd gotten a job, he had some problems, he came out of it, and he comes to basketball games all the time now and harasses me. Yeah. And so, even though some parents think that their students will never grow up, my son's until he's 24, so you still have hope. We all grow up. Almost everybody turns out okay. However, within the last few years, I've seen a change in the society that makes me a little worried about the future. As the stupid media leaders give us games and TV programs and music and movies that have become more and more violent and more degrading, especially to women. As they keep pushing the edge, and as we get more jaded, as we get more, well, it's not really that bad, the edge gets farther and farther and farther down in the mud. Some of the more violent games make my son's Marine combat training pale by comparison. And the lessons our little sisters can get from some music videos can easily be duplicated in the disease-ridden red light districts of big cities. We are the first generation to regularly expose our smallest children to stuff that can take away their childhood and mess up their minds. as we let our media teach our children for money. And we teachers are starting to see the results. We can't really stop the junk that's pouring into our environment. However, when we can't stop the birds from landing in our hair, but we don't have to let them build nests there. If we wouldn't want our little sisters to see it, or our little sisters to be like that, we can turn it off and read a good book. That's what English teachers would say. As you go out into the world, as you go out into the world and become the next leaders, it might not hurt to think that some of the things that we can choose to do, think of some of the things that we can choose to do to make our world and ourselves fit the best that we can be. When that well-known, politically incorrect activist named Jesus was asked to pick the greatest commandment, in addition to the religious admonition to love God with all their hearts and souls and minds, he added that little number that all of us, religious or not, need to remember, to love our neighbors as ourselves. If we can learn to reach out to people in need in our country and around the world, giving to organizations like World Vision or Feed the Children or Catholic Relief Services or Doctors Without Borders, I think I covered all of the groups anyway, instead of the stupid leaders who will only use the money for their palaces, we'll quickly find out that it's more blessed to give than to receive. As we experience, and I have a book in my room, The Healing Power of Doing Good. It's great to be good. It's great to help people. And one of the most exciting things about writing recommendations, because lots of kids have to write recommendations for college. And one of the most rewarding things is to see all the students and all the stuff that are volunteers at the hospital and volunteers at a homeless shelter and volunteers here and volunteers there. And in many cases, these are the students who are the most busy, who are in sports and in school activities. They have to do Andrews' horrendous, endless themes and all sorts of things. And yet they're still doing all these things for other people. They've discovered the wonderful rewards of helping other people. And as for the rest of the world, those stupid leaders who've been encouraging their followers to kill for so long, you new leaders need to help them realize that there's no solution to their fighting other than forgiveness. That may sound a little silly. It may sound a little simplistic. But what else can stop people who've been fighting for 4,000 years? Some of the worst atrocities, or the best example that I can think of, some of the worst atrocities were committed in South Africa under the apartheid regime. But there was one real leader, Nelson Mandela, who had been in prison for 28 years. He'd been tortured and beaten, and aside from just being in prison for 28 years, he came out of that prison. He put aside any bitterness and hatred that he had and convinced the leaders of his country that the killing had to stop on both sides. They set up a truth commission where the horrors could be confessed, but forgiveness would be the remedy. That people would stop killing each other over the past. And so South Africa actually has hope to stop the never-ending circle of violence. In spite of the bad examples around the world, I'm happy to report to you parents that the kids of Stafford High are alive and well. You are some of the neatest kids I've ever had the honor of teaching and knowing. That's why I still love teaching after 35 years. Where else could I get to know 125 new people every year and to get to constantly run into some of the 4,000 or 5,000 people I've taught over the years? Teaching is great if you ever want to be one. I've also been wonderfully impressed with the dedication to excellence and the high personal standards of so many that I've taught. And I'd like to thank the parents for trusting this sometimes sloppy and eccentric English teacher, for trusting me to work with the minds of your children. You know, I could really mess them up. Maybe I have anyway. Tell them not to make their rooms look like Andrews' room, please. It's been neat getting to know them and hopefully to help them develop skills that will make their next steps toward grown-uphood, if that's such a word, a little easier. May the Lord bless. I love you a lot. Keep in touch. Thanks.